Miki, welcome. Thank you for doing this. I assume you're back in Israel. I think that from last time I remember interview, you look like you're in the same room. So I can't remember.
Yeah,
Is
I'm
that
still
right?
here. You can't move much nowadays.
Yeah. Well, that is true with the coronavirus. That secret killer that's keeping us all terrified. Miki, just for the sake of for the folks that don't know, can you give us a little bit of your background? I know you had a second career as an anthropologist, so tell us a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Okay, I did my BA in economics and my MBA, and then I went worked for some large companies in Israel and abroad as well. And at about 52 years old, I decided to quit work, and I started going to the university. Uh, To cut a long story short, about I think a year ago, so I got my PhD in archaeology, and I'm actually defining myself as a paleoanthropologist, and I specialize in the association between nutrition and evolution.
Okay, let's jump into this because this is some interesting stuff. So you have been I mean, you particularly look through the evolutionary lens and discuss a lot about nutrition and what may be an optimal diet for humans. I think a lot of us are interested in that, because we have, as some people realize, that the human species have been around circa 3 million years or so, 2.8, something like that, whenever you want to define the beginning of humanity. And that probably, that length of time, overshadows by, hundreds of fold the very small amount of time been eating the modern diet. And so what we are equipped to eat biologically, physiologically, and from an evolutionary perspective is probably very different from what we're eating now. I mean, I don't think anyone, we can argue about what, humans ate 100,000 years ago, 1.5 million years ago. Clearly, none of us were eating the processed modern food that we're eating today. So that clearly was not part of our menu. Uh, let's talk about the very first humans. When did human beings come about? What was their nutritional strategy? And let's walk us through, maybe coming back from, maybe if we want to say Australopithecus and then forward. How did things progress based on what you've been able to learn as an anthropologist?
Okay, once we were like cousins of chimpanzees. That was like 7 million years ago, or 6 to 7 million years ago. And then we came down from the trees and started walking around, but still we were feeding more on plants. Uh, and to be quite frank, I don't think we know so much about exactly what Australopithecus and his genus ate. But one thing is quite sure, they were based mostly on plants. And terrestrial plants at that, not so much on fruits, because they just lost the competitiveness in climbing trees. So getting to fruits was more difficult for them. But so they still got the fruit from time to time, but really they were feeding more on tubers, possibly uh, all kind of food that you can find. Uh, what we have to take into account is that they had a very high capacity to process fiber, plant fiber, to fat. Okay, so they were feeding. So they like chimpanzees. Chimpanzees probably feed on about 50% of their calories they're getting from fat that is produced, short-chain fatty acids that are produced in the gut from fiber. And so probably did the Australopithecus. The first, then about 3.5 million years ago, still not humans, not the genus Homo. We see already signs of some feeding on meat. And you see it from stone tools that were discovered, which are about 3.4 million years old. And then the stone tools become more and more abundant in sites, in archaeological sites. And then you have like Homo Habilis. Homo Habilis is the first species to be called Homo, but again, he didn't eat that much meat, although he already started to get probably marrow. This is the thinking today, that he started with marrow. Because to get marrow, you don't need elaborated stone tools. You just knock down the bone and you get the marrow out. And this is like, probably had competition from hyena, but not much competition from other carnivores. So that's the way probably we started. And then you start to see body parts that are sought by predators that humans had first access to. So it is not scavenging, it is actually starting to look like hunting. And here you talk about $1.8 million, 1.8 million years, and 1.5 million years. You're talking about a different species, and this is Homo erectus. And the Homo erectus was one of the most successful species, or all the most successful species of humans. They were around 1 million years or so, if not more. And they actually got all the way to Indonesia, probably China, Georgia. So they got around, and they were quite successful species. And I don't think there's a lot of argument today that they were really hunters. And and then I'm just doing it schematic because there are many species between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. There's Homo heidelbergensis and this Homo and that Homo. Everybody that finds some bones try to call a separate species of his find. So there are many species, but really, if you look at it, it's like a gradual change, okay? And sometimes you call the change a species. So between Homo erectus and then the next one, of course, is the Homo sapiens, that we know quite well. And this is like today we think about 300,000 years ago. So 1.5 million years between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. And on the way, you probably had like Homo heidelbergensis and maybe some others. So this is the sort of the evolution as we know it today.
How important were megafaunal animals to the development of the human species, or as we've progressed up the ladder, I guess, to Homo sapien? Or I mean, some would argue that the Neanderthal might have been the from peak brain growth. I mean, Neanderthals had bigger brains than Homo sapiens, at least that's my understanding. So how important is animal fat or animal protein to that, or is it just cooking? And when do we think cooking came about? Was it just cooking starch, which some people will postulate? What are your thoughts on the meat and fat as an important source of our evolutionary adaptations to where we are today?
Okay, that's many questions. So let's start to answer one by one. Large animals, megaherbivores. Megaherbivores, you're talking about animals that weigh 1,000 kilos and up. You have a megafauna, which is 45 kilos and up. But megaherbivores, you're talking about, rhinos and elephants, actually. So you find elephants in sites of Homo erectus. So my understanding now, I don't know if everybody will agree, probably not, is that large animals and mega herbivores actually formed most of the diet of Homo erectus. The thing is with mega herbivores is that you don't find a lot of bones in the central place, what they call central place. Okay, humans are normally, not always, but normally sit in a central place where the family and the whole group is staying, and then the hunters go out and come back. But you just don't carry a bone of and you're talking about elephants that are 2 or 3 times larger than the elephants of today. So you don't take the bone back to the central place. There's no point in that. So you just take the meat, you take the fat, or you take your group to the animal. So as a result, there are not many bones, but there are, still are, bones and especially teeth of elephants. And the reason one of the reasons, there are quite a few reasons why I think that the mega herbivores were the main source of food. And the first one is that they contain a lot of fat. And more importantly, they don't lose that much fat during dry season. So, and this is, by the way, why you have mega herbivores in Siberia, for instance. Yeah, in in Siberia, in the snowy season, you can hardly get any food. So you need an animal that can preserve its fat and can accumulate a lot of fat to start with. So anyway, when you eat a lot of meat, you are limited in the amount of protein that you can consume. You probably can explain it better than I do in terms of physiology, but we are limited. We have to remove the nitrogen, so we are limited. So we are dependent on. So we are limited to about 35% of the protein, of the calories and protein. So you need to get 65, 60, maybe 50% from fat. And that's if you get the protein, you might as well get the fat from the animal as well. So this is one reason. The other reason is that they are simpler to hunt because they don't escape. They might charge, but they don't normally don't escape. So I don't want to go into how do you hunt an elephant, but there are ways, and people have been hunting elephants still recently, so we know how humans can hunt elephants. And mainly you just limit their movement one way or another, maybe in a mud or in a ravine or something, and then you can just kill them with the simple spears, wooden spears even. You don't have to have too complicated spears. So they were easy to, relatively, I mean, it was quite frightening, of course, to deal with them, but relative to hunting animals that escape, it's simple. You don't need a bow and arrow, for instance, that you will need to hunt an animal that escapes. So that's the other one. The third reason is that I know it's not intuitive, but actually elephants pack most of the biomass, herbivore biomass, in almost any environment that they are there. In other words, from an economist point of view, this is like a lot of food around. So, and that you can get easily, and they provide you the fat. What can be better? You have to take into account, even today, when plants are more available than they used to be in the past, and we can go into it if you want. I'm not sure we have time, but the ecological conditions today are different than they were in the Paleolithic. And today there are less fauna and more flora. But even in the present conditions, the return on plants, the average return on plants is about 1,500 calories for an hour of work. Now you're talking about large animals, you're talking about maybe 100,000 calories or more. So it's like 100 times more, or maybe 60, 50 times more. It doesn't really matter. So it's so much, pays so much more to hunt large animals that it just doesn't make sense that they would spend. Of course, they did eat plants. This is something that we have to say. Because first of all, you have old people and some women, because women did participate in the hunting. It's not like women didn't hunt, but when they have kids, maybe they cannot live too far from the camp. So still, you know, they don't have the alternative to hunt. So of course they gather and they get some plants, but by far most of the, in my opinion, most of it was for meat. And then, I'm not sure you want to go into this, but actually after, when I was looking into what was the percentage of animals, food from the diet, I realized that the answer really is not in the archaeology. It's most of it, or more robust evidence is found in physiology, in human physiology. Because we are so well adapted to become carnivore that you can find it in many places in the body. So this is, and you can even trace some of the evidence to Homo erectus, like the size of the teeth, for instance. So there's quite a lot of evidence that humans were carnivores, and you have evidence for large animals, and you have evidence that they were hunting. Of course, there's more evidence, but
yeah, I mean, I look at the work of Michael Richards, who's done a lot of that, as you're probably familiar with, some of the stable radioisotopic work throughout the world. I saw a study.
yeah.
I know he's focused on Europe primarily, you know, in the kind of the last 100,000 years, but I've seen a study going back as far as 1.5 million years ago out of South Africa, looking at barium-strontium ratios. And again, they suggest that those early hominins
That's
were,
Balter, yeah.
Yeah, they suggest that they were also very carnivorous. And so let's talk about, you know, as humans, you know, particularly Homo erectus seemed to be our first migratory species, you know, leaving Africa, going into you know, Europe and Asia. Did the location dictate significantly the preference for animal food? I mean, were they, you know, because Africa is obviously warmer, although we were still in an ice age for most of that time, about 3 million years ago is what my understanding. Did the preference for eating large animals change based on the geographic region, or was it pretty standard throughout, or is there evidence to point one way or the other?
Well, of course, it's difficult to say, but for instance, in Georgia, in the first 1.8 million years site, you find quite a few elephants. So, yeah, they were consuming, most probably consuming elephants. And I don't see how everything that I described changed because it's Europe or Asia and not Africa. The animals are still large, they still have fat, it's still easier to hunt them, and they still form quite a large percentage of the biomass, of the herbivore biomass. You know, in Africa now, in game reserves, there are game reserves where elephants form like 80% of the herbivore biomass. They have to call them, they have to kill them, you know, because they're just too good at surviving. So, you know, it's impossible to say for sure, but it just makes sense that, look, I was not the first one who said it. That was said many years ago, that actually predators disperse more easily than herbivores or than animals that eat plants. For instance, the primates are more or less limited to Africa because these animals are getting adapted usually to plants, and plants do change with the climate, with the altitude, with all kinds of weather situations, soil situations. So, the second largest, we are the most, of course, dispersed animal. The second dispersed animal is wolves. Now, wolves, they have something that's very similar with humans. They eat or they obtain animals from a very wide range of weights. So from about 1 kilo to about 1,000 kilos. Now, why would you bother with plants if you have, because animals you have everywhere and meat is meat. So you don't have to get adapted specifically, physiologically, to consume a different type of food.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring up the point about wolves being the second most diversely spread apart animal on the planet. And again, the point is, what specific plant would you need to diversify across the world? Well, there's none, and so meat is ubiquitous. There's always an animal you can hunt. Let me ask you. I mean, I've seen, and maybe you're familiar with this, some of the thoughts on obviously the biomass of the herbivores, the mega herbivores, the elephants and mammoths and mastodons is much decreased from what it was. How plentiful do you think they were back then? And then also, what impact did they have on the environment? I've heard people saying that elephants, when they are in huge masses, they knock down trees, and some of the other food supply that humans might want to eat, things like honey and some of these other nuts, because of the elephants destroy that, those things aren't as plentiful. And once the elephants have disappeared, you now have more access to that. So do you think, so talk to me about the plentifulness or lack of elephants, going back many years when we were primarily relying on them.
Okay, I already said that elephants, there are some projections to the past that elephants formed more than half of in Africa, about 1,000 years ago, elephant formed more than half of the herbivores biomass. And we're talking about humans, you're talking about herbivores. We are hunting more or less almost exclusively herbivores. Elephants actually make savanna. If you don't have elephants, savanna don't stay a savanna. Elephant in the Kruger National Park, elephants each one knock about 1,600 trees a year. So they are like gardening. They prepare their area. Okay, I'm talking about savanna elephants because there are in Africa also some forest elephants and the different species. But I'm talking about savanna elephants. They create the savanna. When they are not on the savanna, of course, all these 1,600 trees remain. So the landscape looked completely different after a very short while. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind, and also there are papers to prove it, that large animals were much more abundant than today, and they started to decline, especially in Africa. There are good data about Africa. So, but I assume everywhere was not in the same timeline, but in Europe, for instance, the Megafauna Extinction started maybe 50,000 years ago. So in Africa, it started much, much earlier.
Yeah, that goes to the point. Some people think that the human overhunting or the human impact on the environment leading to the demise of these megafaunal animals, there's no evidence for that, and they think it's all due to a climate event, a comet hitting or a large asteroid hitting in North America. What is the evidence that points to that humans had a significant role in the reduction of megafauna?
It's difficult to say. If you look long term, if you look like 65 million years, okay, back, when the dinosaurs went extinct, and there were like mice, that was the biggest mammal around. And the size went up and up and up and up, and you reach a peak of about an average weight for terrestrial mammals of something like 500 kilos. This is the average. So you can imagine that there were quite a few larger species. Today it's 10 or so. So the decline is really catastrophic. If you look at this time scale, and what happened 2.5 million years ago, humans came around. So I can't tell you that they did it, but it certainly looks, and the weather didn't. And by the way, we will have hopefully a paper. I'm not sure it's soon because somebody is doing the master on it. But we will have a paper showing that large animals decline gradually, starting we're talking about the Levant in Israel, around Israel, okay? It's like a very convenient place to look because it's like a cul-de-sac, and there's a lot of archaeology in Israel. So every time a new culture, okay, human culture, okay? So you have the Ashelian is like these stones, these hand-axe stones, and then by the shape of the stone, you can see that there is a different culture. And every time a culture changes, there's a decline in the prey size. Every time the culture changes, there's a decline, another decline, another decline. So we started with elephant, and we finished with animals that are like 20, 25 kilos. Deer, kind of deer. So gazelle, in that case. So I think, yes, I think humans had something to do with it, but I really don't know, the mechanism or, I can tell you that why it accelerated. I don't know about the elephants. I know about how we got to gazelles, I think. Because as you go down in weight, let's say the elephants disappear, okay, or they get extinct, now you need to get your fat from smaller animals. And they don't preserve the fat as well. Well, they don't start with a high fat. So the smaller the animal, the more animals, you actually have to kill animals and just use the fat. You cannot use the protein. And if you think this is like crazy to say, we have evidence on hunter-gatherers, recent hunter-gatherers that used to hunt animals, and when they don't have the fat, they just leave it. Okay? So this is something that I think happened. That they had to hunt more animals that they actually needed just to get the fat.
Yeah, let's delve a little bit more into that, Mickey, because you've talked about, there's a theoretical upper limit for protein in humans, or at least long term. What do you think that number is? And again, when we go back to these mega herbivores, they tend to be fattier. Correct me if I'm wrong, but can you talk about how much fat content would be in an elephant versus an antelope, and what seems to be what historical humans probably strove for? What did they typically eat from a fat to protein ratio?
The classic number is 35% protein, but that doesn't take into account the structural protein that you need. So that can be, another 70 grams or so per person. So that's another 280 calories. So you get to 45, maybe 45% that you can get. And then you need 55% fat. Now, animals that are larger than 200 kilograms, you're talking about, let's say, a zebra and up. most of them have 50% and up fat. And animals that are smaller, like this gazelle, okay, may have 30%. However, you have to take into account that they lose the fat. It's not like they have all the fat all the time. So it's fluctuating. And it can fluctuate between 60 and maybe 20 or 10, or even zero, almost 0%. So, yeah, so this is once you lose the large animals, you're in deep shit, sorry. And then that's what you see actually in Europe, and also in Israel. You see that about 40,000 years ago, when the Megafauna Extinction, it's called the late quaternary Megafauna Extinction, because there were Megafauna Extinctions before, started, you see, as it progressed, you see that they start to eat more and more plants. You see more and more stone tools, and also this, the isotopes. But isotopes, you see plants really like the end of this period. We are talking about maybe 15,000 years ago. You see already these isotopes, some isotope studies that show that humans start to consume plants. But yeah, so when they don't have fat, they have to get it, carbs. So and carbs and fat from plants. Yeah, that's.
Let me ask you back to maybe going back a little earlier again, back to maybe say Homo erectus, who you mentioned was the most successful human species we had living for maybe 1.8 million years compared to our roughly 300,000 or so, or maybe 400,000, depending on what you read. Do you feel that the abundance and access to constant supplies of fat from these large mega herbivores and having it on a regular basis, rather than saying starving and feasting and fasting and starving a lot, was a critical component in developing that brain size? I guess what I'm saying is, do you think we had plentiful access to these foods and we could eat them pretty much whenever we wanted?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was basically they had the Homo erectus. That's why he survived so long. He had good life. And yes, the association between the fat and the brain size. Yeah, you need in order. You see, they did a study. They studied primates, and they took the primates and they measured the quality of the diet relative to their brain size. And the larger the brain, the higher the quality of the diet. So you need, I think it goes both ways. You need the large brain to get the high quality, because everybody wants the high quality food. But it's the high quality that allows you to have the large brain. And we had, for instance, chimpanzee, I think they eat like 8-9 hours a day. Okay, if you have a low quality food, you have to eat all the time, and also to make use of it. Okay, you also in a large reserve. Now with the fat, we could eat, with about 1 hour top, 1 hour a day, and you eat everything that you need. So you have a lot of time to do other things, to do your tools and other things. So yes, I think it was very much associated.
We, again with the fat, I mean, we started accessing the brain cavity and the marrow very early on, correct? Is that correct, Mickey?
Yeah, that's correct.
What's the first evidence of us getting marrow, would you say?
I think it's about 2.5 million years ago, something like that. But I think I'm almost sure. Look, there are tools 3.4 million years ago, so that could be it also.
So even maybe even potentially Australopithecines could have
Yeah,
started with that,
yeah,
and then maybe
yeah,
Homo habilis.
could
Yeah.
be. Very well, because look, chimpanzees hunt. So it's not like, it was something new.
Yeah, I've seen chimpanzees killing small deer, other monkeys. I mean, that's pretty well discovered now. We're seeing more and more of that. Let me ask you about seafood, because there's some people that say that the human brain size was required access to seafood. Does that make sense to you? Does the anthropology support that, or is it or the herbivores plentiful enough with omega-3s and so on and so forth?
Look, to me, it sounds funny, I must tell you. This, how a theory like this survived for all these years, I don't know. Look, you have today, like maybe, I don't know, just give a number, let's say 5 billion people that have no access to fish, okay? And they all have large brains. Some of them are even vegetarian. Some of them are even vegan, okay? And they grow large brain without a trace of omega-3, animal-based, okay, DHA, etc. So this is, I don't know. This, to me, it doesn't make sense. I'm not saying that we didn't eat fish. Of course they ate fish, because we lived we had to live near water sources. And lakes, Africa had lakes. And of course you have archaeological sites near lakes, near rivers. So yes, we had contact with fish or with seafood. But it's not a common find. I mean, you find here and there. Okay, it doesn't preserve as well as the animal, but to say that we were dependent on it doesn't make sense. To me, it doesn't make sense.
Somebody asked me about your thoughts on salt. Do you have any thoughts on how human requirements for salt? But is there any paleological evidence on how we acquired salt, how much salt we might have needed? I know it's a controversial topic among some people. Were we getting it from blood? Do we need as much as some people think? Any evidence on that?
No, I don't have any evidence. I couldn't find not that I was spending a whole day looking for it, but I couldn't find. Somebody asked me the same question on Twitter. I couldn't find any paper that will discuss salt, like adding salt or looking for salt in the Paleolithic. I could find somebody measured the salt in the diet of present-day hunter-gatherer or recent hunter-gatherers, and the range was like 0.1 gram to 4 grams, if I remember correctly. So, and I don't even know about present or recent hunter-gatherers that actually went around looking for salt. So either they actually got it from the blood, or I don't know about it. So yeah, that's the situation.
You've got an interesting take on, particularly in the Levant, as these elephants disappeared. Let's talk about the transition to Homo sapien from perhaps one of the Homo erectus or Homo erectus-like creatures. What drove that? What was a pressure that drove that, and how did that come about, do you think?
Okay, well, actually, I have a paper regarding the Levant, regarding the Middle East, sort of. Not whole the Middle East, but the area, Levant is the area that's close to the Mediterranean, like Lebanon, Syria, Israel, more or less. This is the Levant. But really, it can be applied, and probably will apply, and I'm working on it, to actually the whole of human evolution, everywhere. And the process is, or the theory is quite simple. But it started with the Levant when two things happen at the same time. The first is that the elephants disappear, and this is like 400,000 years ago. And the second is that you find a new human species and a new culture. In other words, the stone tools are completely different, completely different. And judging by some teeth and also some other bones that were found, you see that there is a different species. It's not Homo erectus that we were expecting to have here. So the theory goes that when the large animals disappear, when very large elephants in the first place, you just need more brain to get the smaller animals. Humans, and by the way, this is the primates, also all the primates, solve problems with brain. This is the way we don't grow a long neck, and we don't grow a long nose like elephants, and we don't change so much morphologically. But we solve the problem, and primates as well, solve problems with brain. And so now you have and another thing, and this is, again, this is something very important, and that other paleoanthropologists are, not all of them are so much aware of it. And this is because I come from economy. You have to do, whatever you do, you have a budget. Okay, you have a energetic budget. And if you now, instead of one elephant, have to get 80 deer, you have to get the 80 deer at the same energetic cost. Otherwise, you will die. So in the past, people thought, okay, you know, tough luck. These guys, you know, they used to live on 28 or 2,400 calories a day. So now they'll have to work harder and live on 5,000 calories a day. But that's not the case. It was already proven that humans cannot just move and there's a limit. The energetic budget, budget is regulated. In other words, if you spend more energy on mobility, you will spend less energy on maintenance, on body maintenance, and you will suffer. Your fecundity will suffer. Everything, or not every, but functions in your body will suffer. You know that the people that do the Tour de France, okay, the riders, they're becoming sick, like flies, you know, because they lose their immunity. Today, nobody does the Giro in Italy, okay? It's another long, like 2 weeks bicycle ride. Nobody does the Giro and the Tour de France, although they are like 3 months apart, because they just cannot recover. So, in other words, if your easy prey disappear, you have to find ways to get your food at the same and without exceeding your energy budget. And that can only be done with your brain. So one way of doing it is developing tools that will make it easier for you to hunt smaller animals. Take a very, very simple example. This is the bow and arrow, of course, is one example. But another one, let's take dogs. Dogs were domesticated. There's argument about that, but let's say 20,000 years ago or so, 15,000 years ago, with the extinction of the megafauna. Now, if you can get a dog, you can save energy in locating the animal, in catching the animal as well. So, and what does a dog? Dog can feed on protein. He doesn't have to have fat because he's like an old predator. So he's adapted to high. So with this kind of, but in order to domesticate a wolf into a dog, you need brain. Okay, so this is the theory. The theory is that human evolution and the increase in brain size was necessary because to cope with the energetic pressure that resulted from the decline in the prey size. And this is what happened in Israel as well. That's the theory.
I mean, it's certainly I can see where the plausibility is. Let me just shift gears a little bit, Mickey. One of the criticisms we see out there was that, well, we shouldn't perhaps pattern our eating pattern after our Paleolithic ancestors because they didn't live very long. They only lived to 25. Can you comment on the reality of that statement? Did humans, prehistoric humans, all only make it to 25, or was that more of a did that have more to do with infant mortality and some other things?
As far as I know, it's infant mortality. And look, if you take a chimpanzee, okay, and I'm talking now about the model age of death, okay, the age at which most of the animals of a species die. So in the wild, chimpanzee model age of death is 15. In captivity, it's 45. So it's 3 times higher in captivity, just because they don't get hunted, they don't fall, they don't have to work too hard, they have a medical treatment, etc., etc. So, so now, if you take the model age of death of recent hunter-gatherers, because we don't know what was the situation in the Paleolithic, it's about 74. Now, but the infant mortality is about 250 times the Western world infant mortality. So for every kid or every baby that died at the age of 0, you need to get to 70 just to get a life expectancy of at the birth of 35. So yes, many hunter-gatherers live to become old people. They become grandfathers, grandmothers. So no, it's not like everybody dropped dead at 35. It's not the situation.
Yeah, like I said, we see that quite commonly, but that's something that, even when I've looked at some of the anthropological records, they'll admit aging the skeletons are very difficult because they're not sure what the wear patterns were. We see a lot of arthritis today. Some people would suggest that might be due to our modern diet. And then when we try to extrapolate that to an ancient skeleton that might have a little bit of arthritis, they might actually be 75 instead of what we would see in a 30-year-old here. So, and same thing with the dental record. So I know it's very challenging to do to get that accurate. Mickey, we've just got a couple more minutes left, but is there anything else that any other sort of information you'd like to share with us that most people aren't aware of, perhaps?
Somebody asked me something. Oh, yeah. Somebody asked me how long people worked. I don't know if it's of interest to anybody. I mean,
how long people worked? You mean back?
Yeah, how long hunter-gatherer worked?
Oh, how many hours a day? Because they didn't have too many jobs. I mean, your job was stay alive and eat, I think, basically. But yeah, I guess how much time of the day they spend engaged in working versus relaxing.
Yeah, because I said somewhere that at 52 I decided that work is not Paleolithic. It's not paleo, so I shouldn't work. So he said, so how much did they work? And of course, we don't know about the Paleolithic. I mean, this is not something that lives you cannot dig and find it. But recent hunter-gatherers that had harder time, had to work harder than during the Paleolithic, in my view. They work, the Hadza, for instance, in Tanzania, the women work about 4 hours a day and the men about 6 hours a day. In the Sun, there are reports that they used to work like 2 hours a day. But I think the main thing is that the work wasn't work. It was just fun. So yeah, that's.
Yeah, Travis, I guess you got a new paper coming out, Mickey, or you're doing a new study. What can you discuss that? Or is that true?
I have two new papers that are coming. One that shows that elephants are underrepresented in archaeological sites, and large animals are heavily underrepresented in archaeological sites. But one that I think is that I'm looking very much forward to its publication. It's actually going to I submitted it to the normal journal, but they decided that it's so important, they want to put it in the annual book of that society. I can't say which journal now, but so that's why it get delayed and will be published probably just at the beginning of 2021. But I think this is important, and this is what I decided I started to talk about. How do you determine what was the human trophic level? How carnivore were we? And this is where I list, I think like 29 different pieces of evidence that show that and from all kind of, from biology, from zoology, from paleontology, archaeology, of course, and it says that we definitely we were hyper carnivores. All the evidence shows that, at least the evidence that I found. And I couldn't find evidence against it. I'm sure somebody will find one day, but I couldn't find any evidence against it. And in this connection, I wrote at the end of this paper, there's misconception about the term omnivore. Okay, people think that omnivores is like you can eat everything. And you probably know, if you don't have elephants, I will eat potatoes, It's just not the case. If you take mammals, there's a database of, I think, 144 mammals, what they eat, how much they eat of plants or animals. And out of the 144, 80% were omnivores. Okay, you could define them as omnivores. Omnivores, somebody who's eating from two different trophic levels, so plants and animals. But if you look at how much they eat, 75% of them are specialized. In other words, they are omnivores. Yes, they eat some either plants or some either animals. For instance, chimpanzee is an omnivore. Eat meat, but chimpanzees could not survive on meat because they just don't have the physiology, okay, the morphology, whatever, to base their food. If they don't find food, they will die. So you have the term omnivory and flexibility in food get conflated, okay? And this is what is the tendency to do to humans, because we see the recent hunter-gatherers that eat plants and animals. They say, okay, in the Paleolithic, we could also, we ate plants and animals. We were so smart. And this is why we were smart, because we could eat plants and animals. No, this is not like that. You are built to survive mostly. Most of the mammals are actually specialized. And we were specialized. And that's the paper. That's what the paper says.
Yeah, there's a term called facultative carnivore that a lot of people will utilize, saying that, humans, while we do have some capacity to eat a mixture of food, we tend to thrive on a meat-based approach. Is that a fair statement, you think, based on what the anthropology shows?
Definitely, definitely. Meat and fat. Look, we have to prepare the food. I mean, the food, the plant food that we eat, we just have to work very hard preparing it. It's not like it's not easy. So yes, definitely.
Hey, Mickey, one last question before I have to go. Cooking. When did we start cooking? When did humans control fire? Who controlled it? Is there any concrete? Can we hang our hat on a date yet?
My feeling from reading the media and reading the professional literature is that professionals, most of them, don't think that cooking is a very old thing that we do. I think most people, professional, will say about 400,000 years ago. Some, like Wrangham, who came up with the theory, would say 2 million years ago or 1.5 million years ago. But fire is not necessarily cooking. Fire is very important in terms of protection. Protection when you are terrestrial animals. And we are not predators with our fingers and our teeth and our speed, okay? We are predators with our mind. So we have to protect ourselves with our mind. We cannot protect ourselves with our body. So yes, probably we had access to fire, but also to keep fire costs energy. You have to look for wood. Again, you have to keep the fire. It's not somebody. There's a paper about it, and she shows that to actually maintain fire with a group, it's very expensive energetically, and there are papers today that show that, for instance, the Neanderthals, which lived in in very cold periods in Europe, there were some periods that they didn't use fire. You have one cave and you have layers. Okay, some of the layers have fire. The others have the bones and everything, and the tools, the stone tools, but they don't have any sign of fire. So, and the idea, the theory is that there were just not enough trees. So, cooking in terms of hearth that is used again and again and again in one place, the earliest find is 400,000 years ago. And by the way, I don't know how much cooking is so important if you have an elephant. I'm not sure that cooking is so important in terms of getting your calories.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing I'd heard, and it makes sense, about, how did Homo erectus leave Africa into the colder parts of Europe during the Ice Age period without fire, and perhaps controlling it, keeping them warm might have been a thing. But it sounds like 400,000 years ago, if that's sort of the majority opinion, that sort of coincides with the rise of the Homo sapien. Do you think that had an impact on us as well, besides the sort of the departure of the megafauna?
Yeah, probably. It makes sense that the Homo sapiens would have fire and would do cooking. Homo sapiens probably did consume some more plants. It's possible. Because if he was facing smaller animals, I mean, elephants were still around, but a smaller species of elephant, and a smarter and more aggressive species. So Homo sapiens faced different species of elephants than Homo erectus. So yeah, and there's some signs. For instance, Homo sapiens. There is a paper saying that about 80,000 years ago, there was a change in the human abilities to turn plant-based omega-3 to DHA. There was a genetic change. I think it's a FEDS. I'm not sure the name of the gene. So, and that happened in Africa about 80,000 years ago. So there are signs that he ate more plants and probably needed cooking for the plants. I think more than for the meat. I mean, it's nice to eat meat. It's probably sweet, a little sweeter with cooking, and maybe it's easier to eat and it's tastier, but it's not actually vital, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of people that still in today that will do raw meat. You know, the concern obviously is contamination there. But Miki, this has been really fascinating. Thank you so much for doing this. Can you tell us where people can find more information about you before you go?
Well, most of the information that I spread around is on Twitter. So it's Miki Ben Dor. Yeah, one like no spaces and no hyphens. At Miki Ben Dor, I think this is the handle. And I have a blog in English. There are not so many posts there, but it's paleostyle.com. I have one in Hebrew, but that's probably not relevant to the people here.
Yeah, I can't read it. Anyway, Miki, thank you so much. It's great talking to you again. I look forward to seeing you in person sometimes when we come out of this lockdown and the world returns.
Yeah, we made it out last year. Let's see. Let's see.
Hopefully so. Anyway, hey guys, thank you so much. Come back tomorrow. It's just me and we can answer, it's just going to be a normal session. So for particularly the new folks, I'd love to meet you. Miki, thank you again and appreciate all you do and look forward to seeing some of your new studies come out. Okay, guys, bye-bye.
Bye.